Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Mike Parsons from Madison County. I'm going to have to skip around a lot, but I'm not going to harp on the standards today. Alabama's failure in academic progress speaks volumes. It can pretty much just go up. If you want to keep throwing money down the bottomless pit, big business and the education community can give you additional plans to put your money and spend your money. What I want you to know is Alabama's invested in 2 additional programs other than academics. I don't have time to talk about the career one, but let me get to the most dangerous concept I think you know nothing about. There is a program in the school system, grades K through 2, that is slowly and methodically constructing how our kids actually think. It is, in a nutshell, students are introduced to concepts. These concepts are called competency indicators. Once they're introduced, they continue to reinforce them and track the data in the school system. The students are all expected to accept the competency indicators, the concepts, by the end of grade 12. Introduce, reinforce, master all these competency indicators by the end of grade 12. Let me give you an example. Quote, recognize and respect differences in various family configurations. That's introduced in grades 3 through 5 without the parents knowing about it. So technically, every 3rd grader this year was introduced to the concept that they should respect, as a family configuration, 2 women, 2 men, and a man and woman. Now, it doesn't matter if you agree with this or not. The main point is that you understand that the Alabama State Department of Education has vastly expanded its power to control the career pathway our children are actually taking by grade 8 based on the data, and they're actually constructing how our kids are thinking and acting on various social issues. I have the book right here. I'm asking a roll call vote on House Bill 440, which will stop the failed standards, take us back to the successful course of study that we used to have, and eradicate 2 very radical programs. One of them I consider dangerous, and you don't know anything about it, and you don't understand it.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Parsons. We're going to do questions at the end. Next, I'm going to call Mark Dixon.
I'm Mark Dixon with A+ Education Partnership. We're a nonprofit advocate for education reform here in the state, and we're opposed to this bill. First, it's unnecessary. Alabama has already moved beyond Common Core. We're 2 sets of standards beyond it. And we just adopted a new course of study for math in 2019 that is being implemented currently, and a brand new course of study for English language arts that was adopted by the State Board of Education just last month. And these are both Alabama standards developed by Alabama teachers for Alabama teachers, and are based on current research. And in fact, at the most recent board meeting for the ELA standards adoption, not a single person from the public signed up to speak against these standards, and they passed. Second, the bill is unworkable. It would require moving from our current standards back to an old set of standards for next year, and then a completely new set of standards the following year. That's 3 sets of standards that our teachers and students would have to teach. And this is on top of everything that they're doing right now to help us recover from this pandemic and get us back on track. Finally, there are many unintended consequences in this bill, but a couple I'd mention. One is bans the use of national assessments. This would prohibit critical assessments like the ACT that we take to get into college, the SAT, advanced placement, AP exams, national board certification, praxis certification exams, and NAEP, which we have to give on behalf of the federal government in order to receive federal funding. It also prohibits joining any organization that would cede any manner of control, and that, we look at all the certification and accreditation organizations outside of the state that approve a lot of our programs here in Alabama, and that would create problems. Not only that, but the NCAA, we cede a lot of control around our student athletes in that organization as well. And finally, as Alabama works to prepare toward its goal of 500,000 credentialed workers by 2025, we need standards that prepare our students to compete. This bill would send us back to a set of educational standards that were written over 17 years ago, prior to the invention of the iPhone. We ask you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I call Lou Campopenosa. Thank you so much.
Dr. Lou Campanosi from Fairhope, Alabama. I have the handout that says Alabama education plummeting, so please, if you would pick it up and look at it. First reference I want to talk about is, here's from Trish Crane Powell, November of 2019. Alabama's dead last scores wake-up call for officials. Well, that's you. Now, who's awakened about all this? Because in 2020, Senator Marsh produced a bill to repeal Common Core. It died here in this committee. Now, I would suggest to you that the track record of dealing with this, and Representative Fincher, where are you? He talked about all the bills he brought up here. So we have a very poor track record of being awakened about the problem. Now, if you will turn to my enclosure 3. Enclosure 3 basically takes you down the road of when the plummeting started. And despite what we just heard a second ago, the fact of the matter is the causes of what has happened are right here with Common Core. Now, this argument that somehow there's no cause related to Common Core doesn't make any sense at all, because as you see what's gone on across various socioeconomic lines, we were moving in the right direction beforehand. If you go to enclosure, I'll find it. Sorry. It's the enclosure that basically shows, number 12, the substantial progress that was being made between 2003 and 2009. Now, this question about being awakened and being serious about this problem takes you down to the road of why is it that we only have now 3 minutes to talk about, or 2 minutes when we were told 3. The fact of the matter is, this is a serious argument, and we need to be talking about it in a way that doesn't put binders on us simply over time. It makes no sense to be at 52nd and not having a serious conversation that is not time constrained. I would urge you to take a close look at this enclosure 10. This reinforces what Representative Fincher was talking about. Alabama was doing quite well until we started Common Core. The argument being made by people that we're talking to in terms of supporting it is that there's not enough money. You heard Fincher talking about all the money that's been there. I have been told by someone who works in the governor's office, who is the education guru there, that proration was the problem. You've got to be kidding me. Proration took place during the Great Recession, okay? There is no argument other than Common Core that's bringing us down. We need to change it. We need to do it now. You can fool around with this bill if you want and kill it again. We're only going to come back next year, but this is the opportunity. Take advantage of what you have. If you don't like parts of the bill, fix it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Now we all have your information as well. I appreciate it. Next, I call Matthew Smith.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I am Dr. Matthew Smith with A+ Education Partnership, and I'm here to speak in opposition of this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. I'm here to speak on behalf of Alabama Grit, a partnership of over 50 organizations across business, community groups, and the military that supports intellectually challenging curricula and prepares our students for the workforce. I'd first like to highlight the voices of several Army generals from Alabama who have spoken out against this issue. Retired Major General Jim Miles stated, "We've already fought this fight, and we're making progress. This isn't moving forward, it's moving backwards." Additionally, retired Lieutenant General Tony Jones said of this issue, "We cannot continue our success if we don't maintain the standards. We've moved every 1 to 2 years. The biggest challenge was finding schools with the same standards. To continue to make Alabama the most friendly and supportive state for our military, high-quality, transferable education standards must be a priority. This bill would take us in the wrong direction." Similarly, business leaders have shared that repealing Alabama's standards would equate to a dumbing down in Alabama. A joint letter from Chambers of Commerce in Birmingham, Huntsville, Mobile, Montgomery, Tuscaloosa, as well as the Greater Chamber of Alabama have spoken out against this legislation in the past. In a joint letter highlighting their opposition, they shared, "The voices of business and industry for the state of Alabama have united in support of rigorous education standards that will ensure that our students are college and career ready when they graduate from high school." They continue, "Repealing these standards would damage our schools, our teachers, and our students that are already well into implementation of these standards, and it would certainly damage our economic development efforts in attracting companies who value an educated workforce. Our children need to be among the best educated in the world to compete for admission into the best colleges and to secure good-paying jobs." Alabama Grit and our partners in military and business communities strongly oppose this legislation In this season where schools and students are beginning to recover from the effects of the pandemic, this legislation would do irreparable harm. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next, I call up George Berry.
Well, committee, thank you very much. I am George Berry from Madison, Alabama. That's Madison County. 3 daughters graduated from Madison Bob Jones High School. My wife worked at Bob Jones High School. And 2 issues I want to cover right now were spoken before that was not on my issue to say, but I want to respond to 2 things. My wife does the SAT and ACT test. She would object to the saying that this bill eliminates SAT and ACT testing. It does not. Number 2, you use the name of Jim Miles, General Jim Miles. I graduated high school with Jim Miles. Jim Miles lives in Huntsville, Alabama. Jim and I have had conversations on this. And the conversation he is talking about deals with the social issues, not academic. But Jim and I agree on these issues. You're welcome to call Jim Miles and give him my name. I have no problem whatsoever. But the biggest problem that we have with the bill, not with the bill, but the good thing about the bill is it will remove a lot of the unasked for data collection of our kids. We as parents, because actually I don't represent an organization, I represent parents. And we and parents are outraged that the data collection that is being made on our children is done for the express purpose of placing our children in their career path, using their data and their algorithms. Now, do you understand that? It is the responsibility of parents to make those decisions. We do not ask the school systems to do that. We ask the school systems to teach basic information, basic information on the studies of math, science, and deal nothing with the social studies. That is the church responsibility, and that is the parents' responsibility. Before Common Core and Career, and you've already heard before, the Alabama school system was doing well. Common Core comes along. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. The insanity of keeping Common Core in College Careers Alabama will not get a different results. One example is this. They say that we don't have Common Core, but if you have a glass of tea, which is Common Core, and 1 year add sugar to it, you've still got a glass of tea. The next year you add a lemon to it, you still got a glass of tea. That glass of tea was Common Core, and it's always been there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Next, I call Shannon Colley.
Good afternoon. Madam Chair, fellow committee members, thank you for allowing us to have this committee hearing today. My name is Shannon Colley. I'm the president of the Alabama Association of School Boards. I'm an elected official from the Baldwin County Board of Education. I do represent many constituents in Alabama, so we're not all just private citizens here today to speak about this. The Alabama College and Career Ready standards are unique to Alabama. They're our standards. We own them. We can adapt them. They are simply academic standards that set rigorous benchmarks for our students in each grade. I'm going to try not to repeat some of the comments that have been made earlier about revisions and math standards and English standards, but I do want to point out that our standards are always being reviewed. Each year there's another subject. This year we're actually looking at social studies and career technical education. Our standards today are more rigorous than they were a decade ago. Our local system in Baldwin County, we take the state standards and develop our own curriculum. Our teachers are creating classroom content. Our teachers are reviewing standards. Our teachers sit on textbooks committees. Our teachers have a voice, and we encourage them to participate in the process each year. My school system has spent millions of dollars on instructional material, professional development, supplies, software, textbooks. There are school systems in the state that do not have the funds to replace all of these materials should the standards be repealed. It's starting over and sending us back a decade. Now is not the time to even consider such legislation with everything that has been going on in our school systems this year. Year after year, and this is my final point, I will finish. Year after year, a bill like this is brought up. Year after year, the education community comes out in support of our standards. Our school leaders continue to support the high standards because we see firsthand that our students are better prepared for college, career, and their futures. Thank you so much for giving us the time to speak on this.
Thank you, Ms. Colley. Last, I call up Jessica Saunders.
Good afternoon, Jessica Sanders with the State Department of Education. We've had this conversation many times. I've also had it with many of you about Common Core and the history of where we are. The glass of sweet tea example is a very good example because you can't deny that there are pieces of things that should be taught to children that have been there 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. An example of that is, you've heard it before, but the teach kindergartners to count from 1 to 100. That is an example of a standard. Another example of a standard is to teach fractions, different types of fractions at different types of, like maybe some in first grade, some in second grade. So the standards are simply statements of what to teach. They come with the academic freedom to teach them the way the teacher would like to teach them. That's what happens in your schools. So teachers are told, if you're the first grade teacher, these are the standards you should cover. You have the academic freedom to teach them the way that you would like to teach them. Many things about teaching have changed that include, and we always hear that Common Core now is not memorizing things like we used to do. Our multiplication tables, things like that. We hear that's all different. There are things in the general world of education that have changed about teaching practices. Those practices, they're influenced a lot of different ways. They're like national trends about teaching concepts, different ways, but there is no mandate in our current standards that say that's how something has to be taught. So when you hear somebody say, oh, that's Common Core, the teacher doesn't understand it, the parents don't understand it, that's simply just a misconception about what is used in our state. Our standards are developed by our teachers to say this is when we should be teaching children stuff. They are more rigorous than they used to be. But every speaker that has asked you to consider Common Core has also asked you to consider our NAEP examination. The National Assessment of Educational Progress has some basis of Common Core. We are no longer in the consortium of states that has seceded any of our control to Common Core. We were at one time, we are no longer there. Our standards belong to us, but you will see you can take a non-Common Core state, a Common Core state, you can put them side by side. You will see similarity, more so in math than in English language arts, because there are only so many ways to call something that's math, like fractions and things like that. So you will see similarities. This discussion will likely never go away. When Common Core was existed and adopted and states bought into, we want to use your standards, we're going to use these national ones, and you'll give us 15%, change ability. You'll let us change them 15%. That was once done. We are no longer in that. We're not there. We have our own standards. No one tells us how we can change them, where we can move anything around. They're ours. They're developed here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saunders. I appreciate it. Are there questions for the sponsor? No, sir. We always choose how long we have to speak based on the number of people that are here. And so that's why that decision was made. Representative Fincher, I'm going to allow people to have questions now. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Representative Fincher.
May I ask all?
Yeah, I'm going to take
Please.
mine, pull mine down as well. Thank you. I'm just trying to understand, it's a very short bill, so it's.
It is a very short
It's a huge undertaking.
And it is a huge
In a short
movement.
bill.
It is.
So-
It's a big move in a short bill.
So help me
Certainly
understand just a couple of things that you think about unwinding this, okay?
Okay.
One is, one of the speakers mentioned that there was no conflict or concern about ACT or SAT. However, on page 2, when I read that this would prohibit the State Board of Education from adopting or implementing any other national standards from any source or requiring the use of any assessments aligned with national standards, and would prohibit schools and counselors from using blah, blah, blah. Okay, now I can look at that and say that means that I can't do anything that's aligned with ACT, SAT. I don't think that's your intent.
That is, the standards are Common Core that are being referred to here. The adoption of, now, we don't have to adopt ACT, it's there.
Well, that's what I'm
I
saying.
mean, it's not something the state of Alabama
no.
needs to adopt, or the SAT.
But you're aligning,
whatever.
you're saying this bill, your intention is not to say we're not going to do anything that would allow
It's
our
not to say we would
ACT or SAT.
disallow those tests,
Okay.
Representative Garrett. No, it's talking about standards, and so, no, it is not meant to
Okay.
do away with those. Though I notice some of our colleges are doing away with them right now in the United States. That they're at this point getting rid of those as used for student body accumulation or
But
whatever.
I guess that's my other point. As those things change, a lot of these things are designed for kids to get into college, right?
Right.
So as they
To
change
show
those
proficiency, yes.
things, okay, intention is not for us to allow our children to continue to adapt to those type of assessments or align with those requirements.
Our intention is that they get a very strong, firm education, which would allow them to do well on those tests.
Okay.
That's
All
our
right, so
intention.
that's just trying to understand that.
Yes, sir.
Second, on page 5, it mentions that to design or construct any social or emotional development program for students in public K through 12. Now,
Would you tell me what line or
it's
number?
line 17 and 18.
17 and 18.
This is speaking about a counselor at the beginning of this sentence, but it goes, the sentence I'm asking about is it to design any social or emotional development program for students in public K through 12. So does that include special ed? Does that include, we have a lot of the mental health that we're putting into schools now, a lot of the emphasis of doing that. Would that prohibit us from doing those type of initiatives?
No, I don't think it will. Though special ed, much of special education is covered by federal law and is supervised by federal law.
You understand what I'm saying? I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to understand this short bill has some pretty small statements that I think
And there are some general constructs in this bill. I will concede that.
Okay.
Yes.
Page 3, we talk about going back to the standard of 2011, 2012, and then I think going to some other deal. Again, not trying to be argumentative, trying to understand the unwinding process. If we go back to 10 years ago, which the textbooks, curriculum, things like that,
Were different.
How would we, and they don't exist today. So how do we do
Right.
that?
They were not Common Core aligned.
Well, if we're going to go back to the where do we get
We
those
are going
materials?
to
Where do
go
they
back. Yeah, we're going to go back to the pre-existent standards.
Okay.
And if that's what you're asking.
But don't you have to have textbooks?
And then you have to have textbooks
Okay.
and that sort of
So
thing. Yes.
That's another thing needs to be addressed.
And if the state of Alabama were to adopt, I think there would be textbook companies that would be more than happy to sell us textbooks.
Okay, so that's all I'm going to ask. But I guess my point is, I'm not against what you're trying to accomplish. I'm just saying that the unwinding in a very short bill, there's a lot of details, as you know.
Yes,
So,
there are a lot of details. Thank you, Representative Garrett. Are there anything else for me, or would
Estes.
you like to ask any of these other folks something? I don't want
If
to hog
they
the
do, they
microphone.
will. Representative Estes.
Yes, Representative Estes.
As a former school board member, I just have several things pop in my head. I couldn't help but chuckle, Representative Fincher, when you made the comments earlier about the 10th Amendment clearly states any powers not specifically reserved to the federal government belong to the state. I would beg to differ. That's the way it should be. That's just not the way our
It's not the way it always
not the way our
operates.
country's being run
That
right
is
now.
what it says,
That's
though.
right, but
That is the
that's just
actual,
an aside.
actually what the 10th Amendment says.
I will say, as a former board member, my philosophy has always been test less, teach more. and I feel like that would be something that in itself would be very beneficial. I'm curious, kind of like my colleague here, just trying to kind of get my mind around some of these things. We've talked about those who are in favor of your bill, how there's been an academic slide, let's say, in the state of Alabama since the implementation of Common Core.
Right.
Have other states seen similar slides? Do we feel like that's a true common denominator that we can?
Evidently, not all of them have. I mean, if we're 51st, there are none below us. None of them have slid as far as we have. I would say that. And let me say this is personal. It's not even in this bill, but I am not opposed to testing by any means at all. I very much support testing.
I do too.
To figure out where we are. And what these gentlemen have been talking about is kind of a social testing of social issues and that sort of thing. We all agree there must be academic testing. I mean, there's nobody here that would argue against academic testing, be that the SAT or the ACT or any of those tools.
I'm certainly not opposed to it. It's a needed tool, but I just think sometimes we do a whole lot of testing.
Yep.
There was a time when folks my age come through, we did the California Achievement Test in April, and that's pretty much it.
Yep.
The rest of the time our teachers got to teach.
Representative Estes, I think the key thing you said is there needs to be more instruction.
That's exactly.
And there needs to be good instruction in the classroom.
Well, let me ask you this. I keep notice on the fiscal note, we're looking at a projected loss of $500 million.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that in and of itself would deter me, because I think that's one reason we're in this situation today is because we've become too dependent on federal dollars.
Yeah.
Are you confident in that figure?
No, I'm not confident in the figure. The figure came, and here's what we do when we have something dealing with education. We go to the Department of Education to come up with the figures, and this was developed in the Department of Education. Basically, the loss of funds, most of the loss of funds there would come from the state of Alabama refusing to administer the NAEP exam. Okay? That is what would cost you most of those funds if the state of Alabama did not administer that exam. If that answers.
Two more quick points. I think one of the concerns I've had really with education in Alabama the last several years is it's been a moving target. We continue to move, shift curriculum around, and I have confidence in my teachers that if we'll set the bar, give them the tools they need to get the heck out of the way, they'll get our students where they need to go. It's just we'll have this policy for 2 or 3 years, and we'll come up with something else 2 or 3 years. I was wondering, would you be willing to phase in over, I'm not talking about a decade, maybe 2 or 3 years, because we have had so many moving targets for our teachers to have to try to adhere to.
This bill says move the target back to where it was and then work on an Alabama curriculum.
Okay.
It's basically what it says in this bill.
And I've got a lot of people in my district that would be in favor of this bill. My concern, one of the things I saw in here that concerned me somewhat, was the specific wording toward counselors. That does concern me a little bit. I don't. To me, that's almost.
We've got the lady.
That to me, that's almost independent of this bill.
Right.
To where the bill could probably stand on its own without that section specifically in there. Is that something you would be open to?
We feel like, I think the people that worked on putting this bill together, and I can't speak for all of them here, but I think the feeling is that there is too much social engineering going on, and we need less social engineering, and we need to instruct our students and let them choose a career path independent of being pushed in a certain direction. We don't mind guidance up to a certain point, but we don't want anybody to be strong-armed, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Representative Easterbrook.
Yes, I have a couple questions. I'm looking at this graph.
Yes, sir.
And you see where it started going down.
Right.
And we talk about where Alabama scores. Where
Right.
does Alabama rank in funding? Where did they rank then? And where do
You know, I've had that discussion with a lot of people. When you start talking about funding in Alabama and compare that to funding in Oregon or funding in New York or funding in California, you're comparing apples to oranges. actually, the state of Alabama, this legislature does a good job of funding our students based on our average income, our cost of living, and certain things like that. Our state legislature does not underfund education in this state. I think, Representative Easterbrook, we do a fairly good job of it. And there are a lot of moving factors when you start ranking according to funding. You have to take those things into consideration, obviously.
Well, I saw a chart probably 6 months ago, and I don't remember exactly where it was at, but Alabama ranked in the upper 30th of the states in the country in spending per pupil.
Yes.
And our scores were number 50.
Yes.
So something is out of whack.
And I said in my statement, there are some things you can't throw money at and solve. But to answer, to deal with that, I think you're correct. I think at the state level, we have very good funding. At the local level, even though we do have exceptions to that in Alabama, at the local level, our funding is not as good.
Yes.
I think, but at the state level, I think we're doing a good job of funding, and we keep increasing that funding.
We're steadily increasing it, but I would still like to get what we're paying for.
Yes, get a bang for your buck. Huh?
Number 40, I want to be able to score at number 40. I mean, you can't expect them to do something with nothing, but if we're funding at this level, I want results at that level. And I'm not an education expert, but I don't understand.
None of us are.
None
of us are.
Thank you.
Any other-
Representative Morris.
I just got a few questions.
Yes.
Going back to page 5, where it says between lines 13 and 18, no public school. Would this?
Excuse me, I've got too many papers up here. Page 5.
It was where
lines-
Representative Garrett was.
where he was earlier.
Yes. Would this-
13 and 14, no public school official.
Would this by any way affect any of our vocational training?
It would limit. I think it would limit how much we push a student in a certain direction. Are you familiar with what they did? They've done it in Europe for years and years. The old European system, at a very early age, they decided whether you had the academic capacity to go to college or if you needed to be sent to one of the trades. And they did that at a very early age. I don't think that's a good thing for our students here in Alabama.
But would this impact our vocational program?
And those that wish to participate in the vocational program should have it open to them. And I think it should be made known that those things are available or that certain jobs are available. I don't think we need to force people in certain areas.
The reason I'm asking is because I'm a cosmetologist. I'm a
Yes,
cosmetologist
I knew that,
instructor.
yeah.
So I took vocational in high school.
Right.
And it was one of the best things that happened to me. I worked at brick and mortar, and my career, the company left.
Yeah.
So